Hello, everyone, and welcome to Aquarian Radio at aquarianradio.com. And I'm your host, Janet Kara Lessin, with my co-host, Karen Christine Patrick. And today we are going to interview Gillian DeArmond Green, who was born clairvoyant in Yorkshire, England. Throughout her childhood until the present, she has spoken many times to her personal guide, whom she calls David, and who is also known as Hermes, who is also known as Thoth or Thoth, who is also known as Nigashita. Hermes, over the years, Hermes has taught her many things regarding the development of her spirituality. For many years, she has taught metaphysics. Hold on, I got to get rid of this. I think people know I'm on the show and they call me. Okay. She has taught metaphysics and done clairvoyant readings for others in the United States and abroad. And Gillian is an Anunnaki incarnated in human form at this time. We're going to go into that in great depth over the next 2 hours of our show, which I promise you listeners is going to go fast. And Karen, let's say hi to you, and then we'll bring on Gillian.
Oh, yes, hello. I'm really excited about this show. It's kind of sometimes what we call Girls' Night In, which is a fun energy, and definitely always interested in talking about the Anunnaki. As some people know, I have an Anunnaki ancestor that I'm in contact with, and he's a lot of fun. So I'll be looking forward to hearing about her contact and incarnational information. It sounds great.
Wonderful. So, Gillian, welcome to Aquarian Radio, the Anunnaki panel. How are you today?
Thank you, and thank you for inviting me. I'm in, as they say in Yorkshire, I'm in good fettle. And that means that I'm feeling pretty good at the moment. And so what would you like us all to talk about this evening?
Well, we've covered a lot of this on 2 other shows, but this is a completely different audience. So we have 3 networks that we work for in the Aquarian Radio Network. And this one is on our blog talk, and we will take this and put it on, make a YouTube out of it. So that'll be going up in a few days. So we're going to focus today on the Anunnaki and who they are and your history and how you came to be associated with them. And I know you shared some about your different incarnations, different species, and now you're currently human, but you were Anunnaki and you were involved, and you still are involved with one of the principal characters in the Anunnaki play. He's known as Hermes. What is that? Triskemiscus? I never knew how to pronounce that. How do you pronounce that?
Trismegistus. Hermes Trismegistus. Hermes thrice-born. The thrice-born.
Yes, thrice-born. And Hermes,
yes.
That's who Hermes is in the Anunnaki, hierarchy. Who is he? Why is he so?
Ningashida.
Yes.
Yeah.
Why
second.
Is he so
the second. Why is he important to me? Because he's
in the whole pantheon, the Anunnaki pantheon.
Oh, okay. Well, he's the second son of the Enki, Marduk being his most well-known son. And the most interesting or exciting thing about Ningashida is that his father, the Enki, who was the chief scientist for the Anunnaki, passed on all his knowledge. Ningashida had a great aptitude for science and mathematics, and he passed on all his knowledge to him. And he, in turn, passed it on to the humans on this planet. So it began a very long time ago with, more recent for the Anunnaki, but long for us, the 4,000 year ago era when he was going all over Europe and England, Scotland, as well as he came up from South America. After, for those people who are familiar with the Anunnaki, they will remember that when he was Thoth the Egyptian, which, by the way, is his favorite outfit. He loves to dress up in that outfit. But when he had taken on that role, his brother Marduk was at that time wanting to be Ra, the famous god Ra. And they had a falling out, and Ra won and banished his brother the Thoth to what they termed the underworld, which is actually what we now know as the Americas, all of the Americas. And so Thoth went there with a large number of his followers, including me at that time, and we went over to what is now known as Peru as our base of operations, but we traveled all up and down that great coast and up into North America and across into Europe. And one of his main preoccupations at that time was building the great henges, which we use for astronomical purposes, for measuring the stars or something.
What does that
circle? It means a circle of a henge is a circle of stones, a stone circle. Yes, a henge is a stone circle, or a henge is the circular part of it that you actually use. That it's placed in such a way that those stones allow you to mark different periods of the astrological year. You can measure the year with it. And of course, in those ancient times, this was an invaluable thing, because previously the local indigenous populations of these areas across the whole of Northern Europe had depended upon their shamans, and the Americas had depended upon the shamans, going into some kind of trance or looking at whatever they were looking at in their area and telling them, okay, now's the time you plant the crops, now's the time you do this. Well, what David taught them was that these things are a matter of simple mathematical formulas. So in the way that we now know as a very simple thing, after the last frost, then we can start planting our gardens. So it was the same thing. What the henges did, they made available to all the local community for however many miles around to be able to go to the henge and see what time of year it was, and it was explained to them, when the sun is at this point, this is the planting time. When it's at this point, this is the harvest. This is the time you can expect the first snow to come. So it was a solid stone calendar for people who could neither read nor write, nor indeed had any written history at that time, most of them. And so it was a huge teaching tool, an actual physical calendar that could serve them and help them in their daily lives. They were not built as religious artifacts at all. The Druids took over many of them, including Stonehenge, which is very famous, and made them sort of religious centers. But that's not what they were built for. They were purely built to enable local people, because obviously in those times the single most important thing, two things, shelter and food. And so this enabled them to work out their food growing. And you find them all over North America. Okay. And they were built by Thutmose at that time.
Let me ask you a question before let's pause right there. I kind of want to break this down, and then we can do like a download of information. Right now, I want to kind of compartmentalize our questions and answers, and then we'll go back and just let you free flow. So I'm reining you in a little bit because there's some important things I want to cover. When I want to go back a little bit, you mentioned Egypt and how there were two questions I have over the Egyptian period. From my understanding, Enki intervened with the wars between his two sons, Marduk and Ningishida. And he basically said to Ningishida, who was a more rational son, Marduk is kind of like Trump, having a little hissy fit and throwing fits and tantrums. But Ningishida was, he was capable of having war, but he was very brilliant, logical, rational, and you could reason with him. So he said, look, son, how about you go over to the new world there and start things there, and we'll just give it all to Marduk, and we'll give Egypt to Marduk. So that's one thing. And the other question I had was about the costume. So let's go ahead and answer what happened. Let's back up. Is that true, what I'm recalling here, or what my husband had said in his writings, that there was a battle?
Well, yes, absolutely. But you see, let me make this plain so the listeners understand and where I'm coming from on this issue. Certainly the brothers had a falling out, and certainly we ended up in South America. But if you were 17, 18 years old in a family, a large family, and the adults were quarreling about something, would you necessarily know all the ins and outs of their discussions and what they were fighting about if you were the teenager? A lot of it would be hidden from you. Now, in this time period we're talking about, my age was the equivalent of a teenager. I was about 18 years old. If you translate it into Earth years, right? The fact that if you multiply it, I'm like 65,000 years old already, is irrelevant. It's still only as many years to the Anunnaki as it would be to here. And I was only 17 last time I came to this planet. And in the Egyptian period, I would have been about 19 years old, equivalent. And all I know about it was that at that time, I was having a very good time on this planet, prancing around as a priestess at Garnock. I mean, I had a really good job. Remember, Thutmose was my grandfather, is my grandfather in Anunnaki terms, and, you know, he set me up as one of the head priestesses over in Karnak, and I just pranced around all day throwing things on fires and generally having a good time, as any teenager coming from an affluent family is probably doing today in America. And so what the argument was with or what intervention actually Enki made, I honestly don't know, and I wouldn't know. He probably did interfere. That's probably exactly correct the way Sasha has worked it out. All I know is that 1 minute I'm having a good time in Karnak, and the next minute we've all got, you know, the push, and we have to pack up because we're headed out for the unknown in Peru. And about 400 of us went. We were a substantial number of people. And the other thing that is interesting is that at that time, or maybe it was in the time before, but going across the Pacific, and it was the Pacific, what is now the Pacific, that we went across. That was like a vacation trip in itself. The ocean, it was not a big, huge ocean like it is now. It was much shallower. The water was much shallower. There were massive islands and reed beds all the way there. I mean, we kept stopping off on little islands and investigating things. We had balloon baskets and riding in balloon baskets as we were going over there. So the journey was not, it was a cavalcade that went, obviously, with that many people, but it was rather one of excitement and anticipation in going.
So about what year was that in Earth terms when you
well, it was between 4,000 and 5,000 years ago.
So this is after the Great Flood.
Oh, yes.
Which was 13,000 years ago.
Yes, that was already occurred and was receding. That actually occurred about 14,500 years ago, because that's about the time that I came back to Earth in this last go around. And at that time, the flood was receded. There'd been almost a mini ice age, and the snows were melting. And that's about 14,500 years ago.
So what happened between the 4,000 years ago, approximately, when you came over here, and now that the ocean is much deeper and all those little islands are gone?
I would imagine earthquakes, general upheavals, the things. I mean, there must be geological records that can account for this. Melting ice shells before they, come back up. This is a constant process on the planet, but I would most likely think that it's been subsea earthquakes that have continued and changed the landscape, just like they do in Hawaii today. When the volcanoes go, it changes the formation of the land when the lava goes in the sea. Islands can come up and go down very quickly. In fact, I was, there's a new one somewhere out that I was reading about recently that appeared in a matter of a few hundred days suddenly there's this island sticking up. So it's not. I don't think that's an unusual thing. The rise and fall of the oceans is fairly common, I think.
So the second question was about the costume of the Egyptian period for Thoth and Kashina, where he has the face or the mask of an ibis. And it's a very strange representation in the artist rendition. It kind of looks like it's ibis is a bird representing eternity. And so it's the right. Even today, if you go to Egypt or one of these places and you get the statue of the ibis with the long beak, that represents eternity. It represents the hereafter. And Thoth, as Thoth the Egyptian, was a guardian of the hereafter, right? So it was a very appropriate mask for him to have. One of learning, Was he one that escorted people who died to the other side, or is that because he revived people from the dead? Do you have any idea why he was in charge of the hereafter?
Well, it's not exactly that he personally was in charge. That's what they created a priesthood to stand between them, the scribes, to stand between them and the people, right? Thutmose was essentially ruling, right? So he's the top of the tree, and under him he has then these scribes, these priests who were scribes, and with them they developed a language that showed people how to get to the hereafter, the journey that you make. And so in that sense, he was the way shower or the leader or in charge of the path to heaven, It's just a way of telling stories. It's a way of telling stories. I don't actually remember him doing anything much like that because his main interest was mathematics and science. And he was a brilliant scientist, brilliant surgeon. And medical surgeon I'm talking about.
Right.
So, he from a practical point of view, he wasn't standing around all painted up, waving people into heaven. He was doing the things which he liked to do, which was mostly science, the science things.
I want to give Karen a chance to ask a question. Karen, would you have any comments or questions?
I have a curiosity about the other name that Thoth had, which was Thoth the Atlantean, because we have the translations of the Emerald Tablets from Thoth the Atlantean. So I was curious about his connection to Atlantis. What was that about?
Same thing. It's the same thing. The Atlantean era was just a period that had passed in an earlier time, but when the Anunnaki were here on the planet, and you know what happened that time, they pretty well blew the place up. And Atlantis and Lemuria were simultaneous, right? Atlantis was, you might say, Middle East, Northern Hemisphere, and Lemuria was Australasia, Antarctica. That was in the time before there was snow in Antarctic. And the New Zealand, that whole massive, it was almost like the Earth was divided into two halves. There was a polar cap, a band of land, a band of sea, a band of land, and another polar cap, except I'm not even sure if the poles were where they are today. They might have been quite a different measurement. But it was at the time before there was any ice on Antarctica, which time is coming again fairly soon, of course. But it's still the same person. Thoth the Atlantean is no different to Thoth the Egyptian. And he fulfilled the same role, a role of science, a role of research, a role of experimentation, and pure mathematics. I have very few memories. I know I was in Atlantis because I remember my name very well. They call me Atalanta. And I remember some things about it, a very few things, like when you have vivid memories from a vacation or something, but you can't remember the hotel you stayed at or whatever. The thing I most remember about the Atlantean period is the bull jumping. They raised purebred white albino bulls, small ones. They were more the size of Jersey cows. But once a year there was this great festival that lasted many days, right? And it climaxed with the young people, because I remember doing this, the young people being brought together, and these young bulls all lined up with all their horns gilded and flowers on them and things. And then they let the line of bulls go, and the young people had to run behind them and grab the horns and jump on board and ride these little bulls. And I remember that as if it was yesterday. And I remember, too, playing a game which subsequently in the 16th century became known as real tennis, which today they call squash, right? But it was made on a court where you had to hit the ball, but the ball had to be hit through these rings. You had to knock it through these rings that were on the wall. That was all the time of Atlantis. And at that particular time, I had a much different relationship with David. He became my grandfather later through a whole process, a whole different thing. I got killed. I had to be reborn. I wouldn't bore you with that story, but before that, he and I had a very different relationship. Let's put it that way.
You were more like beloved.
Yes, we were.
Intimate
and had been
lovers.
and had been for a very long time.
Did you have children with him?
No.
No children.
I did not.
So I wanted to know, since Stoke is half, he's part of the Yankee clan and the Enlil clan. His mother is a Rishka gal.
Well, because of his mother.
Granddaughter.
Because his mother.
Right. Which clans did he identify with?
Too.
Did he identify himself as aligned with one or the other clan?
I would say he's 100% an Enkiite.
Mm-hmm.
I would totally. I know he supports his father 100%. There's great affection between them. Great affection, always has been, and I think that there have been over the years, and as far as I was old. This time I'm still young, but I was old before, if you know what I mean, in a previous experience. And the before time, my memories are, can I say, very bitty, very shaky. They're not clear. So I just remember the feeling of it, or the patches, but I have a very strong feeling that there was a lot of discomfort in the relationship between Ingashida and his Enlilite relatives. That it somehow it wasn't comfortable. But generally speaking, even between the Enlilites and the Enkiites as two major factions in our history, that directly affected our history, in their own history, in their own space and time, the only one that it's almost like both sides will gang up against Marduk. Marduk was the black sheep to everybody, right? Enkiite and Enlilite. Poor old Marduk was and still is.
Scapegoat.
He is the scapegoat, and I'm not saying he's a good character by any means. I don't think he is, but he's certainly very. Somebody was saying something very negative about him to me recently, and somebody you never want to meet. I didn't like to say. I've met him many times. And he's actually an extremely attractive personality. He reminds me somewhat of my first husband, right? Someone you really don't want to live with, but you could go out and have a good time any day of the week,
Right.
He's
Is
that
there any
kind
personalities like in our celebrities that might be close to him, what Marduk is like? We can kind of
with what Marduk is like. Well, I can tell you what
stars, alive or dead?
I can tell you one that Ningishida is like, and that's and I've told you this before because he really is, and that's a young Sean Connery. You remember Sean Connery when he did Dr. No, right?
Right.
When he did the first of the Bond movies.
Right.
Ningishida, they have, and of course Marduk and Ningishida actually look very much alike. Very much alike. Sometimes it's hard to tell between them.
Wow.
If anything, Marduk is a little bit heavier built and a little bit darker in complexion than Ningishida is, but they're both extremely good looking. Extremely good looking.
So what about Enki? What does he look like?
Enki is just he's big, right? Broad. You almost could take him for a prize fighter. You know, he's just that big, husky. Looks as if he belongs in the outdoors somewhere. And Enlil, on the other hand, is much more delicate structure. Enlil is slimmer, slighter build altogether. But Enki is husky build. And again, very dark, very attractive. Dark hair.
They have dark hair?
Why do
dark
they hair.
The Anunnaki are blonde and red hair. Who has blonde and red hair?
There's a lot of blonde and red hair. Now, my own mother is very blonde. She has blonde hair, and you know those.
Is that your
when you see German opera, like the Flight of the Valkyries and those kind of Wagner operas, and they have the blonde hair in plaited, long blonde plaits, and they twist it up round their heads. That's how my mother wears her hair, and if she undoes it, it's blonde hair down to her waist. And my hair was very blonde.
Anunnaki.
But my father, Anunnaki mother, right?
Okay.
But my Anunnaki father.
If you switch to your human relatives, let us know when you're talking about human relatives. But you're talking about your Anunnaki.
Well, I'm only talking about Anunnakis right now, right?
Okay.
If I switch, I'll tell you that Anunnaki mother and my Anunnaki father has reddish hair. There's a very distinct red, dark red hair. But my brother just has dark hair. Yeah, so the red hair is very, very prominent among the Anunnaki. That's why you see so much red hair among the Egyptians. The red hair among Egyptians is very common.
Mm-hmm.
But both Enki and Marduk and Ningishida, they all had dark hair.
Now, what color are their eyes?
And curly.
Dark and curly, yeah. What color are their eyes?
Dark blue. Blue-green eyes. In fact, if I just look now and bring into my recall, Enki's eyes are truly green eyes. Green, beautiful eyes. But the boys have like that violet blue eyes with that touch of violet in them. Yeah, really lovely blue eyes.
So,
but you're right. A lot of them are blonde hair.
Yeah.
So essentially, they have all colors, but red is a very predominant color, especially among the people at large. The general population among the Anunnaki, there's a lot of red hair. A lot of red hair. I mean, I'm talking about not ginger-colored hair, but the true red. Dark red hair. You see that among most of the military seem to have that color hair. You know, the ones who come to be part of the soldiers, the guards, whatever. A lot of red hair.
They have the. Are the Anunnaki reptilian? What's the story that's going around, especially David Icke, that the Anunnaki are reptilians? And
it's not
behind
true.
that.
It's not true. I tell you what I think is behind it. No disrespect to David Icke, because I think he's been a great researcher and he's certainly a great presenter and he's written some wonderful books. And I have great respect for the work he's done. However, rereading those books recently to clarify in my own mind, wait a minute, why am I saying, no, this is not true? I need to see what he actually wrote. And I recently reread the two books that deal mostly with his reptilian thing. And I think what happened was that he got all his reptilian storyline from the shaman in Africa who he dealt with, who has a racial history, an oral history among their people about these particular beings who they are assuming are the reptilians, right, and shapeshifters.
Right.
And at the same time, you've got the true stories that come out of Africa as well, from the Dogon people about the Anunnaki. And they tell it about, they came from the seven sisters out of the skies and they taught us this and this and this. And they were some of the Anunnaki who spent some time with the ancient Dogons and obviously gave them a great deal of star information and various other pieces of information. And I can't speak for David, right? But my impression is that what's happened, he has taken two stories and combined them into one. And that has resulted in saying, so the Anunnaki are the reptilians, and therefore they're evil, bad, shape-shifting, da-da-da-da-da. And that's simply not true. The Anunnaki never were and never will be. The reptilian species, there are two things that you're looking at here, not to muddle, two things that I know about. Your person who was on the radio the other day, Billy Carson, right? Brilliant man.
Yeah.
And he brought up the Ubaid people. And anybody who takes National Geographic has recently seen a whole series of articles about the Ubaid people. And these were very, very ancient. Exactly as you said, U-B-A-I-D, Ubaid. Right?
Ubaid people. Okay.
And these are human people that lived on this planet in most ancient times, prehistory, right? Long before the Anunnaki came to this planet, obviously. They apparently are about 3 feet tall, or maybe 3 or 4 feet tall, very squat, ugly little people with reptilian-looking faces. Billy Carson hypothesized that they might still exist under the ground, still some of them in pockets in the inner earth. I don't know anything about that. But I do know that they have a reptilian look to them. And if you look at Darwin and Darwin's history of people, the life coming out of the oceans and standing up and becoming upright and so on, you went through that whole reptilian level of evolution. It's an evolutionary thing, and those people obviously got stuck at that level of evolution. That has nothing to do with the reptilians that are now being so bandied about as Anunnaki. Those reptilians came from a completely different creation, nothing to do with our universe at all. They got into our universe by mistake through an error that occurred millennia ago, eons and eons of time ago, long before Earth even existed. They got into this system and they made a home base for themselves on a planet called Draco, and are still there. And through the millennia, like many species, they became space travelers. Now, the thing that is different about them, as opposed to many other species, humanoid species in our creation, is that they are, by their very nature, very long-lived. They live a very long time, I understand. I mean, hundreds, maybe thousands of years, but very long-lived creatures. And so through the eons of time, they have become space travelers. They travel all over. They have an interest in the mineral wealth of this planet. And ever since the Anunnaki, about Well, the Anunnaki mapped Earth about 4 million years ago. But I can't remember how long ago it was when they actually opened the way through the asteroid belt to get here. Probably, half a million years ago? It's a while anyway.
Yeah, the story that Lessin says it's 450,000 years ago.
Yeah, that's probably about right.
They were aware of the Earth, so you're saying they mapped it millions of years ago.
Yeah. Yes, that's right. About 4 or 5 million years ago, they started mapping our solar system and the Earth inside, right?
So how old are the Anunnaki? How did the Anunnaki get created, and how old are they? Do you have any idea?
Yes, I do, and that's what I wrote that little booklet about. And if anybody cares to read it, it's printed out on George's website. On what's his website? The website is nohoax.com, nohoax.com. And on there, I believe, in fact, I'm certain, he has a little booklet that you can just read on the site, or you can print it down or whatever, called The Return of the Anunnaki, which I wrote in 2011, specifically as an introduction to a lecture in London that I was doing on the Anunnaki. And in that introductory lecture, it talks about the origin of the Anunnaki. The Anunnaki are a different species altogether because they are creatures of light. The difference between them and every other humanoid person in the universe is that they did not begin life in the universe, the physical universe. They didn't begin their experiences of life on a planet and evolve from there. They came from the original creation itself into the existing universe. They came down into it. They didn't grow up from it. And so they are pure creatures of light who, quite frankly, degenerated over the millennia of years and their involvement with planets. But really and truly, they came here as angels, as messengers, right? The word angel, as you know, means literally a messenger. And they were messengers from the center of creation, whatever that is, right? From the center of creation into the physically manifesting creation itself. And they came down into it when stars were forming planets and long before the solar system, And they've been observers from the beginning until now. And throughout all that time, they began to involve more and more with the physical creation, become more attached to it, degenerated as a result of that, increased in density, increased in attachment, came very attached to their sensory awarenesses, that they didn't have when they started out. And so they have deteriorated. And as we all know, they are a pretty scrapping, fighting, fornicating crowd, or have been in recent history. And now many of them are trying to turn that around. They say, no, look what we've degenerated into. Look what we've lost. And that's why half of them want to stay within this physical creation. Primarily Marduk and his adherents wish to stay because they have come to love the physical experience of life on a three-dimensional planetary system so much that they wish to continue that experiment. And the other half, like Ningashida and all the crowd that are around him, and there are many of them, they want to get back to where they were. They've thought the whole thing through long enough, and they decided, no, it's time we mended our ways, got back on track, and became once again the spiritual beings that we really are. So you've got half coming back, actually coming to this planet and trying to live here on a full-time basis. And there are many people, and many Anunnaki. I remember David saying to me, never forget you are a true daughter of the Anunnaki, meaning that my DNA, my genetic, my history, my both spiritual and genetic history is Anunnaki. And that being so, there are many others like me in human form, and throughout the human incarnations, however long these people like me have been doing it, our purpose, underlying purpose, if you like, as we were stuck here anyway. There were probably hundreds of us stuck here, thousands over the years, I expect, that for whatever reason are human. Our underlying job is to experience, store those experiences, and pass them back to the Anunnaki, so that they can learn from the past mistakes, if you like, so that we can all be better off for it. We can all learn from the experience, which, as we know as humans, is never easy to do. It's not easy to learn from other people's experience, ever. We need to experience for ourselves. So here am I, and probably hundreds like me, experiencing on behalf of the Anunnaki, who are not here to experience.
Right. When we met, we talked about, when we met years ago. Do you want to tell our listeners how we met, you and I met? At the conference?
Oh, yes.
Remember that? Go ahead. You tell them how you met.
No, you tell how we met, because I've forgotten.
Okay, you've forgotten. Well, you can correct me if I'm wrong, if I spark the memory, but we had a booth at the Lessin conference, which was
Paul that's
Harris's
right. And I
conference.
walked right up to you, pretty well said, I know who you are. Yes.
What did you mean by that? Because we talked about
well, I recognized Sasha first, because you were down at the table and I saw him, and it's like, wow, this is interesting. And then I saw you, and I recognized you as certainly manifesting the energy of one of the very well-known Anunnaki, and you know who you are. I don't know if you want to tell everybody.
I identify as Nimma, and I originally got that many years ago when I had a hypnosis session, and I recalled the ceremony where I came down here, so I had to speak on remembrance of why I came here. And when I was down here at terraforming, I was a different entity. I was Kira, which is like a higher level, emanation of myself. See, we're all multidimensional beings simultaneously existing on many levels, so that nothing special. But you can access your memory, and I think we need to do a little bit of explanation. Gillian has full recall, not full, not every little nuance, but you know who you are as an eternal being, and I do too. And Gillian has her story, how she remembers, but I basically came down here as a conscious being, and at one point to prevent me getting killed by my mother, who thought I was a demon seed, and some other beings, if I was talking away in advance of my natural capabilities as a toddler or an infant, they were afraid of me. So I had to tone it down, so to speak, and become human and limit my language and my energy, which was too big. But what happened when you? Well, let's finish that. So you and I recognized each other. We had long conversations, and then we've been hanging out at conferences ever since. Except this year we missed. But hopefully, in 2016 we missed. But hopefully, we can get together somewhere because we're going to be on mainland about 4 or 5 times, and maybe we'll get close enough to have lunch again. Because it's always a great pleasure hanging out with you, and because it's an energy. Being an Anunnaki is an energy. And
it is an energy. Yeah, it's a frequency that you live on. Well, I used to live in a tiny town in Montana called Twin Bridges. About 350, 400 people lived there, and one of my neighbors was a very nice gentleman who was a mathematician, and because of my connection with David, of course, we had a lot to talk about. So we would talk, and finally I was telling him something about mathematics in the universe, universal mathematics. And he said, where are you getting this stuff from? I said, oh, David taught me. So he said, this happened several times. So he said, well, I don't like to be rude, but who is this David who gives you all this information? Because he said some of it, there's still, science is still asking questions about, and you're saying these are the answers. And I said, oh, well, yes, my friend David, well, right now he's on, you've seen that big light up there on the Westerns. Well, that's a huge spaceship. And right now that's where he is. And this man looked at me and he said, you are talking to people who are not really here. And I thought I was okay. I said, well, yes. I said, they come visit sometimes, but they're not here right now. And he can talk to me anytime. He doesn't have to be here to talk to me. And he said, I think you need to see a psychiatrist, young lady.
Oh, my goodness.
So I asked him to leave, right? I politely asked him to leave,
right.
Poor Herbert. But no, it is a different energy. It's a different frequency. And when you meet it in someone else, you're absolutely overjoyed because, it's like, well, it's like if somebody comes up and they say to me, oh, you're English. You start chattering away to me because they're glad to meet somebody from home. And isn't that the key?
That's it.
You're meeting someone from home, right? Right now we are exiles on a foreign planet.
Right. So you're mentioning your English DNA. So I did my Ancestry.com last February for my birthday. It took me a couple months to get the results. So guess where I'm from? I'm from the UK.
Yes, you probably are. You probably are.
7%. Yeah, most of me is from there. So we're cousins. This Earth body.
That's right.
Cousins. Yeah, so there you go.
And the English have this great arrogance as well. The English are a very arrogant race, but also the true English, the Anglo-Saxons, the Celts really that moved into Scotland and Wales, but the true English, they are remnants of Atlantis.
Right.
If the DNA records could go back far enough, you'd find that you're left over from Atlantis. That's what most of the original English were leftovers from Atlantis.
That makes sense. I wanted to bring Karen back
when
she might have a question, and then we'll be good. Finish your thought, and then we'll have Karen ask the question. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, you were talking about when you came to this planet, and I have to, say again that as far as I am in this particular cycle of my Anunnaki development, when I get back home, I will be about 21 years old, right? I'm still a youngster, even though next week I'll be 80 on this planet. At home, I will be about 21 or 22. Not very old at all. Still very much a junior. And when I listen to people like you talking, who know their history just the same as I do, right? We all know our history. But they came down as you did, and they knew their purpose, and they wanted to come and help mankind, and they wanted to be dutiful and do their thing. Well, I have to tell you, when I came, I can remember the hour before I was born like yesterday. I'm standing on the brink with one of the beings on one side of me and one on the other, gripping my upper arms and saying, Gillian, you have to go. Gillian, by the way, has been my name for a very long time. It is my Anunnaki name, as well as my name now. But they were gripping me on either side and saying, you have to go. If you don't go, this child's going to be born and it will die if you don't go right now. And I was kicking and screaming. I don't want to go. You can't make me do this. I was the most unwilling person coming to the planet. And then when I got here, I think I mentioned to you once before, when I was about 3.5 years old, I went into a sort of I don't know, a semi-comatose state, completely blanked out. I remember the day my mother put me to bed because the doctor said I was having a breakdown. I was 3.5. He said I was having a breakdown. I needed a complete rest, and I had to stay in a darkened room for a month, right? Mm-hmm. So I went to bed, and they got me up a month later, and in the space in between, I was off the planet. And I asked them, what did you do? Why did that happen? And they said, you weren't adjusting well to life in that body. We had to bring you back and reprogram you. Now, I've never forgotten them telling me that because, isn't it interesting? Reprogrammers.
Right, yeah.
That's an interesting statement. Actually, it was David who said it.
I had a similar thing, too. I wasn't in a comatose state, but there was one night where I was just talking in full sentences, and I'm this little teeny tiny baby, right? And I was about 18 months, and they came in. They said, we have to shut her up, or she's going to get killed. She's not going to make it. And so there was this whole ritual where they, I think they took me outside of time and space, so there wouldn't be any kind of lapse for the infant, that the body that I was inhabiting, or for my parents who would have freaked out being not having their baby there. But when I came back, I was not able to speak like I had before. All I could do is, baby talk. And I remember that about 5 years old, it's like, okay, now you can shut off the baby talk. And I had this little tiny voice, and it's like, okay, I think we can back off on that a little bit, because it was getting ridiculous, Yeah.
Yes.
All right, well, that's interesting. So let's give Karen a chance to ask a question or reflection or statement.
Hello. Yes,
go ahead, Karen.
I've just been listening and identifying with so many things. I have a fairly distinct memory of before I incarnated about arguing about the forgetfulness clause, where you're supposed to forget everything and swipe the slates clean. And if I go there with amnesia, I won't be able to remember what I need to remember to tell them. Don't make me do that. So basically, what was given to me was Cassandra syndrome. And Cassandra was the daughter of Priam, the king of Troy. She was telling everybody exactly what was going to happen to Troy when it was destroyed by the Greeks. And her syndrome included she would be able to tell the truth, and absolutely nobody would believe her.
That's
so
right.
that was my kind of confusion for a while. And then when I was between 5 and 7 years old, I realized I needed to just go ahead and zip it around the grown-ups because they thought I was crazy or something. They were like, I knew I was talking about things I wasn't supposed to know about. So I, kind of cooled it and just observed and listened. But, sometimes our incarnational, plan or whatever, we're allowed to argue a little on the causes of it, but then there's consequences if you're going to go from not exactly human to being human. It's sometimes an interesting transition. But what I would like to ask about, because I know other people have got this on their mind, I can read their minds from afar. So I'm a person who doesn't have an exact memory of who exactly I was, except that I believe I was Anunnaki. I have an Anunnaki ancestor who calls me his daughter, but I don't let him do it, so he calls me little sister. And that I don't have a specific who I am in the pantheon. I can't pick that out. But a lot of people do. Sometimes you'll have, I know Janet gets contacted by 5 Inkies and 2 Enlils and 7 Margits in a
exactly.
week, So, there's this aspect of they seem to be incarnating in several bodies at once. I'm not sure if that's cheating, but, it just seems like, or the other thing that's possibly happening is that, I'm from Native American, and we remember the memories of our grandmothers and our grandfathers, and, it's a genetic memory situation. And I was wondering if you had any thoughts or opinions on, are we really them? Are they incarnating multiple times?
Okay.
Is it just that big a personality? Are we just remembering what our ancestors remembered?
The answer to that is yes. Yes to
I
all
had a
of
feeling.
Right?
I had a
because
feeling.
first, so we're clear, we all have race memory. From our mother's mitochondria, we have race memory. And that's the memory of your familial history, your culture, whatever your familial line has experienced and lived in through the ages. That is your race memory, and that's purely physical. You also bring your soul energy in with you, and that carries your, if I call it spiritual DNA, because it also carries the memory of your more ancient self, who you are at soul level, that is now incarnating into this familial history, into this familial line. But you are your soul self doing that. So you have that history, which is what is usually forgotten. That's usually the part that is blotted out when we're born without our memories. I came and I have both, right? So the other thing that you mentioned about multiple Enkis, multiple this, that, and the other, right? Well, now, I'm only me.
Oh, yeah,
right?
We have people that will say, I remember being Enki, and there'll be several people. I actually know several people.
So I'm just me, and because I'm not a person of any importance, I'm, if you like, the one and only me. Right? I'm not big enough. I'm not important enough. I'm not powerful enough. I might have had, and indeed I do know, I had in the last century, in the 18th century, I had two me's that I know about on the planet simultaneously. But when you talk about the great beings of the universe, the Enkis, the Marduks, the Ningashidas, the Ninmars, they are perfectly capable of sending aspects of themselves down into this experience. So they can have 10, 50, 100 aspects of themselves. What makes those aspects genuine Enkis, Marduks, Ninmars, is that they have a fragment of the soul energy and the soul memory of that person. And I spoke about this once before. When you are in any particular lifetime, you rarely, if ever, have the totality of your eternal soul self in your incarnate state at any given time. You, generally speaking, bring down into any incarnation that amount of soul history which you will require in that particular lifetime to deal with the experiences that you are going to be facing. And that soul energy in a lifetime is housed in the form of hydrogen molecules within the body. Having said that, think now that you're back to your original mighty self in the universe. Let's say you're Ninmar, all-powerful Ninmar, right? And as Ninmar, you realize that you need much more experience in several areas, and you don't have time to do them all. You don't have time to live all those lives. How can you gather all that experience effectively and efficiently? Well, what you can do is allow a certain amount of your energy, your self, to be incarnate in these hydrogen molecules in a body here and another body there and another body somewhere else. All those bodies are genuine aspects of you, Ninmar. And when those physical bodies die off, that energy will in total return to you. You will absorb all that soul energy back to you. It's a concept known to some as the oversoul. And it really is a true thing. A powerful oversoul can fragment its soul energy into multiple bodies experiencing simultaneously on any given creation. They can perfectly well do that.
That correlates with the Dr. Michael Newton Institute, which they've done over 40,000 regressions into the life between lives, and that I just found out about 5-6 years ago. I read that series of books, but that correlated what I was getting. What what I get about Nimma and Enki and the main characters in the play is and it started with Thoth Nagashita when he went to the halls of Menki. He discovered how to consciously lay your form down and send it out through different human fetuses, and that's why he's thrice born. At one point, they said like thousands because most of them don't wake up, and they're hoping to accelerate consciousness for human beings because it's time. It's just time we start waking up, becoming conscious, and so that's the hopes. That's why they sent so many of them. But the ego is so strong in human form. When you send a thread of your consciousness down into human form, you're in a symbiotic relationship with the body that you're incarnating. So that you're dealing with two people in one form, and it doesn't always jive. So that's why there's not 10,000 Enkis awake. There's only a few.
Right. Right.
So one time I was going through a rough period when I came here to Honolulu back 20 plus years ago, and they matched me up with a male version of myself, and we became lovers. But we knew it wasn't forever. But it comforted me. It's a new way of expressing masturbating, right? Making love with yourself, literally in another human form. It was like a space holder until I met Sasha. But it wasn't time for us to meet yet, so I had this little space holder. The young man was 20 plus years younger than me. It was never going to be like a full-on relationship. Didn't have enough in common. But it really comforted me, and it was great that I had a lover who was very, very, very sweet. I'm a very sweet person to make love with. That's all I can say. So, yeah. Okay, I have other questions. Yeah, but go ahead. What else would you like to say while I go look at my questions?
No, that's okay.
Go ahead.
You ask your question.
Well, you're doing such a great job, and I got some feedback from the previous 2 or 3 shows we did, and they said, I don't have it in front of me right now, but where did you find Gillian? She's such a gem. I could listen to her all day. So it was several.
I'll tell you a little story that's nothing to do with the Anunnaki about that while you find your next question and sort it out, right?
Go ahead.
This little story is that many years ago, almost 40 years ago, when I first came to America, I went out to work for 3 years, and I was brokering mobile homes, used mobile homes, at like real estate, but with mobile homes. And I had this lovely old couple. I lived in Michigan, and I had this lovely old couple, and they'd sold their house in Detroit for a pittance, and all they could afford for their retirement was a used mobile home in one of the parks out in the suburbs. So I found them a really nice home and sat them down and went with them through the paperwork, page by page, and there are 5 or 6 or 7 pages, and it took me about 15 minutes to explain it all to them, and I went carefully through it all, and I said, now, is there anything that you don't understand? And this little old man, he looked at me and he said, honey, he said, I haven't understood a word you said, but I could listen to your accent all day. And I thought that was so cute. So sometimes I think it doesn't matter what I say. Some people seem to find my accent so entertaining that they'll just listen to that. I think I sound like everybody else, of course. I don't think I have an accent. So what was your question,
they like the
Kira?
content of what they were saying. They like the content. Well, there's a lot of information out there in the internet and the UFO field about these different species, and so we didn't really cover much of some of the background history. So let's try to retrieve that. You have one of your questions or one of your things you're covering in your book that you wrote in 1994 is, what is our role in the cosmos? So somehow we got from the cosmos down here. The Anunnaki are, we are related to the Anunnaki with their children. How did we get from there to here?
Okay.
Through the cosmos.
Okay.
How did that
well,
start?
first of all, we didn't get from there to here. We're going from here to there, right? So,
okay.
And I'm really clear about this. I never say to somebody, you better believe it because it's the truth, because what people choose to believe is entirely up to them. So I'm not asking anybody to believe me, but I'm telling it the way it is, right? Earth humans, as on any planet, right, and any planet in the universe that's come into existence, the planet has formed, animal species have developed on it, and herb species, plants, flowers, trees, these things they developed as they did on Earth. And out of the earth, or out of the ocean, there came creatures, and those creatures came to the land, and just like Darwin says, the evolutionary process of development. And we developed to the level of an upright hominid species, Cro-Magnon, Neanderthal man, on the planet, learning to live in groups, to use primitive tools, to have some forms of communication, to develop language. These things were all going on when the Anunnaki came to this planet. Now, there are very few places left on this planet which are untouched by the Anunnaki gene, but they do exist. George would tell you a story of one time when he went down into the Amazon jungle, and they came across a small village of maybe 20 or 30 people that had never seen anybody from the outside world before, and they still live as Stone Age people. They have not developed beyond the Stone Age. And the same was true when I was in Indonesia. There is an island in the middle of a great lake in northern Indonesia, and nobody had ever been to this island. It was believed to be uninhabited. And when some researchers went in, they found that right in the middle of this dense island jungle, there were a group of 20 or so people living like Stone Age people. That's the level to which humans developed. Left to nature, that's what they got to, and there are still living examples on this planet. What the Anunnaki did, because remember I've already said they are creatures of light, they are cosmic beings, they are eternal beings from the beginning, right? They didn't evolve anywhere or grow into it, they simply are, right? And so they came to Earth and they did genetic engineering, and they implanted into humans a pair of their own genes. And that pair of genes allowed man not only to develop the level of sentience that he has, the ability to think and grow and have intelligence and do all the things that men can do, it also gave them the opportunity to become immortal beings like the Anunnaki. Those genes, if you put the light genes of the Anunnaki into the hominid species on the planet, then when the planet as a physical reality dies, when it goes away, and when everything physical on it disappears into the dust and has to start over, all the humans on this planet who have that Anunnaki DNA in them, and that is the vast majority of humans, right? All those people have the potential of eternal life. The great teacher of this that came to the planet to remind them and say, get it right, was, of course, 2,000 years ago when one of the Anunnaki, under the label of Emmanuel, or Jesus Christ, came to the planet and reiterated that message. Live right, live by these rules, which are obviously the golden rules, right? Live by these rules, and that enhances you. You become enlightened, in other words, filled with light. You become the same as the beings of light, or the same as the Anunnaki, and you become an immortal being. Then you will live forever. Then you will have eternal memory. Then you cannot lose. And the fact that the Anunnaki have so screwed themselves up does not change their basic nature. Their basic nature is light. They are creatures of light. They're not creatures of a physical, three-dimensional, animalistic planet, right? But those who are, being normal humans, and this has gone on for eons and eons of time. You know, as an Anunnaki, you have seen planets coming to being, civilizations evolve, some civilizations rising to extremely high levels of culture and intellect, but they are still part and parcel of that three-dimensional physical reality. And when that reality ceases to exist, they cease to exist. The great difference for humans, and this is why they flood here from all over the cosmos. Any space-faring species throughout our universe is trying to get to Earth because we're coming to a point of great change, a break in the space-time continuum, a switch which is going to end the old cycle and begin a new one. And they all want to be here. We haven't got 7 or 8 billion Earth humans on this planet right now. We've probably got what we should have, which is, you know, maybe 500 million Earth humans. The rest have all crowded into Earth human bodies on this planet to be here for this change, to get the value of the Anunnaki gene that is now spread throughout the whole human race. Anybody born on this planet today has that gene, those genes in them. And that means they have the potential to become immortal. So when our sun goes brown dwarf or whatever it goes, and when the planet crumbles away to nothing, they will still exist and know who they are. And that's the key, continuing consciousness. So being Anunnaki is a fabulous thing.
So that's why we reincarnate. What's with the shortness? The Anunnaki, their bodies, their forms, since they've hundreds of thousands of years. What's going on with the shortened life expectancy of these human avatars? Can we lessen them? Is that going to happen? I know that we have the technology. I've talked to Dr. Aubrey de Grey. And
they can reverse the telomites. Yeah,
and he said that, right now it's going to be 1,000. This is 3,000 will reach escape velocity, and basically he didn't believe anything about the Anunnaki. Wouldn't even let me talk about it because didn't want anybody to call him a space cadet and distract from his research and stop funding his efforts. So he just wanted to strictly stay with the research on it. So we already have that. It's being repressed.
Right.
But and then I just want to say, Dr. Lessin came in and he's here. You want to say hi, honey?
Anytime you talk, I want to listen. Keep talking.
Okay, so let's talk about the physical immortality of the Anunnaki, and what do you think is repressing it that will come out as public knowledge? And back to you. Yeah, go ahead.
I didn't catch the second part of what you said. What you think is repressing what?
What's
the knowledge?
Why don't we have this knowledge? Did they shut off the 256 strands of DNA so we don't have the longevity genes turned on?
Right. Why don't we have all this knowledge? Well, first of all, we're getting much more of it every day. It's kind of like some of the spacecraft that have crashed here in the past. They took them into the military immediately and started retroengineering them, and then took that knowledge just to make bigger and better things to destroy people with, right? And so when the Anunnaki were here before and they did the genetic engineering, they did that purely for selfish reasons. They wanted a slave labor force. It's no use making bones about it. They were sick of working themselves. They were pretty much went on strike and said, we're not trained for this and we're not doing it anymore. We need to domesticate some of the creatures on this planet to do the work for us. So they had several unsuccessful and very unfortunate experiments that didn't work out. And eventually, as you know, Enki and Ninmah came up with the right combination of ova from the lady in East Africa and their own genes, and they created Homo sapien, right, modern man, so that he could be slave labor. And of course, you know the story. When they first created them, they thought they would not be able to breed, which they wouldn't. But they weren't satisfied with the speed at which they could recreate these creatures, and so they gave them the ability to breed themselves, and they bred like rabbits, and in no time at all they were spreading all over the place, escaping. They escaped, and that's how the genes spread. It was never the intention of the Anunnaki to spread their genes all over this planet. That would have been an unbelievable infraction of the rule that says non-interference. So they, David used to say to me, we don't just have an attorney in our heads, we have a whole law firm that justifies just about everything we want to do. Well, that was just like the Anunnaki. They justified it by saying we will breed creatures who are intelligent enough to be trained as a labor force, but they will not be able to breed, and because they can't breed, they'll last us 700 or 800 years, and then they will die out. And we will not have interfered with the evolution of the rest of the people on this planet. Well, of course, we all know it didn't work that way, and they spread all over. So you now have a situation where
that activated their ability to breed. That's what the story says. That he
it was Enki.
But they laid down, and then Nagashita told the story. Nagashita was the one that actually performed the operation using Enki.
Well, he probably was, because he did this, because he was the surgeon.
The surgeon.
He probably was.
Right.
Yeah, he probably was the one who actually did it down in South Africa. That's
right.
That it was simply a way of speeding up the process of producing this labor force because of the high demand. There was a very high demand for these people, these intelligent, upright people who were capable of learning. They learned very quickly and were very smart. This is something that we need to maybe mention. It is an astounding fact, and that's what really has spread the fame throughout the universe, you might say. Earth humans have, since the time they were genetically engineered, they have evolved themselves. Once they had that in them, they of themselves have evolved at a rate that's never been seen before in the universe. In a matter of 4,000 years, let's say, they have gone from being trained servants to nuclear scientists putting rockets on the moon. They've evolved with so much speed. So in order to never make the same mistake again, to never interfere again, the Anunnaki have been standing back, and what they were waiting for was for these developed Earth humans to, of themselves, without any outside interference, map the human genome. That was the turning point. When Dr. Clark was one of the first ones, they mapped the human genome, meaning they could start working with DNA themselves. And once they got to that, that's when the Anunnaki started feeding back information through various sources and coming to the planet and interacting with them in scientific laboratories. There are Anunnaki coming to the planet. They're not coming to me because there's no reason to. I'm not doing anything. But to those people who are doing something, many of them are getting direct contact or second-hand contact with information. And it's been pouring in this last, 10, 15 years since we mapped the human genome. To give them knowledge, to give them information that will allow them to move forward very quickly. And out of this, of course, the latest technology is reversing the telemides, so you can extend life. And one of the things that's happening is the planet is actually going to move as it comes to the end of this cycle and then begins the new one. As I think I mentioned before, about 2025, 2026, as the old cycle ends, one of the things in the disruptions that are occurring, mostly because of 12th planet going round us, going past us, Earth's orbit will be flung another 4 degrees out from the sun. So we will become a cooler planet, but we will also have a longer day. The reason on Earth, as you know, we have, when you go to school and you do math, we have 360 degrees in a circle, right? You remember that from school? 360 degrees in a circle, right? Well, that's because when the Anunnaki first were mapping the Earth, it took Earth exactly 360 days to orbit the sun. Now it takes it 365 point something days to orbit the sun, and in the future it will take it something like 380 days to orbit the sun. It's the same if you go to Saturn. It's there are 1,270 degrees in a circle or something like that. In other words, the degrees in a circle are dependent upon the time it takes to orbit your sun. That's just part of their math. That's the way they do their math. So they're already stretching time on this planet. It still isn't long enough for an Anunnaki. It's very difficult for the Anunnaki to be here and live in the short cycles. And that, excuse me, that was at the core of all these abductions that have gone on through the years that were Anunnaki-based, right? Many of them were. And they were coming because when the Anunnaki as a race left this planet about 3,500 years ago, and then they came back, right? But when they left, Marduk and the Igigi, most of the Igigi, stayed on this planet in South America and built an underwater base under Lake Titicaca. That was the first underwater city that they built for themselves to stay in, and started the abductions. And the abductions were, from day one, an experiment to try and create a hybrid of an Earth human and an Anunnaki, so that they were still true Anunnaki in the sense that they could be immortal beings. They could have at least a very extended life, and still live in this planet which has the very shortened cycle around the sun. So it's just, and that's what they've been trying to do. Well, they haven't been very successful with it.
Because at one point they came down, Anu came down, and he said to his children, Enki, Nima, and Enlil, you guys have aged. You know what's going on. And that's part of this short cycle. Is that what caused the aging?
Right. Yes, exactly.
So that makes sense, exactly what you said.
Yes.
That they're trying to create a hybrid that will be able to live here and not age. Go ahead, Sasha.
Right.
In terms of Monaco, with decision was that as Marduk was closing in on Sinai and Nabu was coming up through Canaan, turning the cities of Canaan, and Neil had ordered Adad, Viracocha, and Inertia, and with the help of Thoth, actually, to build the city of Tiwanaku, and presumptually Monaco too, with the big runway would be at Nazca. And so a lot of this, and so Sitchin says that basically it was David Nagashita who showed everybody in the whole South American Anunnaki, not Marduk, but Nagashita, who showed them how to build the pyramids. And then when you have the people coming down from North America, they start running the Maya the Olmecs out, and they start killing people. And then the last battles are fought at, where Colombia touches Central America, and basically Ningishita and the Enlilites are retreating at whoever's coming up from the north, and I think that's Marduk's people are killing them.
Hello?
Okay, he's done. Yeah, okay, go ahead. You're done talking.
Well,
So we have different versions. I don't know what to do with that.
To be honest, when Sasha was talking, I was only getting about every third word because it was breaking up so badly on my receptor here on my phone.
Okay.
That I know he was talking about South America, and I heard about the mention of the Olmecs and things, and that it was Ningishita who was doing the building down there, and that's true, but I really couldn't understand what he was telling me or telling the audience. Sorry about that, Sasha.
Oh, okay. I'll just listen to that comment.
Okay, so we're going to go back to it. We have about a half hour left, and so let's continue. Karen, do you have a question or comment before we?
Well, I kind of have a comment because she talked about the Human Genome Project, and I thought that was really interesting because I found out that the Human Genome Project had to have had a patient zero. In other words, there had to be a particular human's genome that was sequenced. And from what I understand of the story, there was a woman who came from a line of humans that actually did have more extended lives as part of their genetic heritage than other humans. And they call this sort of like the Methuselah gene in a sense. And this particular human's immune system was off the hook. I mean, it was really terrible what they did to this woman. Give her Ebola, give her diseases, give her all kinds of, conditions and poison and everything else. And she would, go into a coma and then kind of purge, all her fluids would sort of flush everything out. And then she'd wake up out of this coma, and she had been able to conquer all these diseases. And then they went she was basically a slave. I mean, she was like a lab rat. And they owned her genes. Her genes were patented. And so what they in essence have is the perfect gene therapy machine. And they're able to take her DNA as she defeated a particular virus or a toxin. They were able to take that particular antibody that she built up in her system and use it as patent medicine, but not necessarily for the masses, but possibly for some of the elite. So I think that's very interesting because, that they're letting us kind of find this. Not necessarily us in the sense of the rank and, file human being, but the ones at the top that have unlimited resources to make themselves, at the very least, more immortal than those the rest of us. There seems to be a multi-tier system by where one group of humans gets nearly all the resources of the planet, and the other parts of the humanity, don't, and that includes space travel, so that becomes the breakaway civilization. And I think that's very interesting because I think most people are pretty much onto that by now in terms of research. My partner Brett Shepard and I research the moon connection. I'm just finishing a book called The Anunnaki and the Moon. And basically we have space travel, but it's a secret space program. It's not offered, we don't get to ride it there if you can't afford the ticket in a sense. So it just seems to me if the Anunnaki elite were looking for human bodies that they wanted to be able to use and, for a more full human experience and yet not suffer all of the rapid cycling and having to be back in diapers again, as Neil Freer said. He says, I don't want to do that stage again, and so he was looking for longevity as well before he passed. I think that's very interesting because they're letting they sort of created us. They sort of created the Frankenstein monster. Now the Frankenstein monster is going to create them. The reflection of that is really philosophically very interesting. So I appreciate what we were saying, and I was just wondering if you had any comments on what I said.
Well, I think what I would say is then they're not, yes, they are letting humans find their own way into their own future. They've learned the lesson of non-interference. That's the first thing. But in this genetic engineering, they're not having humans create a new form of the Anunnaki. The Anunnaki are still the Anunnaki. They're not, all they are doing is trying to make adjustments to their own bodies that will enable them to continue as they've always done but stay on this planet. That's not quite the same. They're not trying to turn themselves into humans in the sense of Earth humans. They're simply trying to adjust their Anunnaki bodies in such a way that they can live on the Earth in the way that Earth humans do, but with the extended life. So that doesn't change. And the other thing I would comment on it is that, in fact, the Anunnaki don't do as a norm the going back to babyhood in diapers. That actually happened to me the last time that I was born to the Anunnaki before I came here. You know, when I came here 14,500 years ago. Prior to that, I had been reborn as an Anunnaki. But that is unusual for most of them, most of the hierarchy, because they keep their DNA and they have bodies prepared for them. Laboratory bodies, if you like, clones, if you like. And then when the time comes that the body they've got is completely injured, damaged, worn out, not worth bothering to fix, they simply move into their new body, which looks and behaves just the same as the old one did. You wouldn't know the difference. And it's not cloning like, you know, they do here in America out of Fort Detrick and these places. We know that at Bethesda they have clones. We know that many of the head politicians and peoples of the world have clones operating on the planet today. We know, for instance, that certain people were killed, political figures were killed and died, but their clone is still walking around on the planet. The difference is that as yet, no one on this planet has developed the ability to transfer soul energy as well as intellectual energy. They're simply transferring intellectual energy. And the American Indians have a name for this, for people like that. They call them non-people. They say they're non-people, meaning they're people without souls. They're just biological entities. So there's a huge difference between what the Anunnaki are doing and what we're doing. The Anunnaki can do it. You do a total transference. Yeah, you let the old body die off and move the entirety of its soul because they are light beings, not
the royals,
bread and butter beings.
The stories that the British royals have been able to do this transference. Are they Anunnaki? Are they doing, which type of transference are they doing?
Well, of course, the stories I've read about, you know, the royal family are the David Icke stories about them being shape-shifting reptilians, right? And whether that's true or not, I don't know. I have no idea whether there's any truth in that. I find it's possible, but shape-shifting of that, because that is shape-shifting, right? Shape-shifting of that kind is well known among the shamans of the North American nations, you know, the people of the nations, the North American Indians, have always had a tradition of shape-shifting, and it's well known among them. And among them, usually, I've found in any stories I've read of their shaman's ability to do shape-shifting, it is something which is done for spiritual purposes. It's something it's not meant to be a dark thing. However, there is a dark side to it. You know, the most famous Western shapeshifter was a magician in the 19th century called Aleister Crowley out of England, and he was a black magician, and he took a group of people with him to Egypt one time and shapeshifted himself into a camel as a demonstration for them. So. But this is very dark magic. This is black magic. This is most of that kind of shape-shifting is connected with satanic ritual. And although I know something of it because I've read about it, I'm happy to say I don't have any actual experience of it, but I know it exists. I know that kind of dark magic does exist, but it's nothing to do with the Anunnaki, except insofar as they know how to do it. Because it's shifting energy. It's simply taking energy, you might say disassembling the molecules and putting them back together in a different form. It's control of the field. You know, when you start to talk about, well, to be honest, I find that it's best not to talk about those things at all, and I'll tell you for why. Not because they don't exist, but because when you get into it, it's whatever you say doesn't give an answer. It only raises a question. And you have to keep going back and back and back and back. And eventually you get back to the point where you say, okay, we're probably living in a holographic universe. It probably does exist, just very much like the Matrix describes it. It's a series of on or off. You know, it's either visible or invisible. It's either looks like this or looks like that. So there is the science out there to understand this. But I'm no nuclear physicist. I'm no expert on the science. And I think anything less than the science of it is speculation. In other words, we call it black magic, but it really is manipulation of energy. Somebody who has learned the ways to manipulate energy. And that really can be a good thing or a bad thing, depending on which side you stand. If you stand on the good side, for instance, you'll be like Emmanuel. You'll be able to hold your hands out and turn water to wine and raise the dead. If you stand on the dark side, like apparently the British royal family supposedly do, you'll be able to turn yourself into an avaricious reptilian person who tears blood out of living bodies, or whatever it is they're supposed to do.
Yeah.
Light and dark, the two sides of the same coin. The opposing sides of the same coin.
Right, same coin. Yeah. Okay, I wanted to go back. I think Sasha left this. I wanted to go back and ask a couple questions. We have, well, it's 4:36 here, so we're coming up at the end of the show. So who's in charge now on the Earth? Which of the Anunnaki? Are the Anunnaki at the very top in charge of the planet?
No.
If so, which one?
No, the Anunnaki are not in charge of this planet at all at this time. It is intended that it will come under the charge of Marduk. He's the one who has been promised he can come back and take charge. It's his turn. And the interesting thing about that is that it is historically the turn of the Chinese to take the leading role on this planet. And my information is that after the change, we will have a kind of, because I expect we're going to lose a large number of the world's population over the next 20 years from one thing or another. Probably because they'll have all had enough of the chaos and want to go home, and so they'll all be fleeing off this planet in any way they can get, right? You know, we think, we don't want to talk about disasters and wars and people dying, but they've got to get home somehow, and maybe those are the ways they'll be choosing. We have to wait and see. But we will lose an estimated 60% or more of the global population in the years ahead of us, in the next 20 years or so. And having said that, one group of people is going to become predominant. Culturally, the United States of America is designated as the world's leader, using the Constitution of the United States as the foundation of global government. But those in charge and actually administrate that global government are expected to be the Chinese. And humans, when we look back and we say this was the Neanderthal era, this was the, Cro-Magnon era, well, when people look at the era that is now coming up in front of us, it will be known as the era of Tan, Tan. It will be known as the Age of Tan. That's the future. And it will be under Chinese dominance, and it will be a form of global communism. And it will actually be a very good world because it will be based on the concept of that are based in our Constitution: equality, fair play, evenness, even-handedness, justice. The things that are in our Constitution. But we have never managed to actually live it. In America, we have the world's greatest document for the governance of man, and yet we don't live it. In communist China, they've gone through one of the worst periods probably in human history, like Russian communism, where families and cultures were torn apart and just terrible, terrible situation. But if you can combine the two concepts of communal sharing, which is communism, communal sharing, under the auspices of a document like our Constitution, you will have as near utopia as you're going to get on this planet. And that is what is expected to come into play under the overshadowing of Marduk. And he will be playing the role of Ra.
So then who's in charge now? So none of the Anunnaki? There isn't a global elite, the Illuminati, that's controlling it all?
No. They think they're running things on this planet. They are. They're controlling things. And we all know the families, the 300 families that govern the world, the Bilderbergers, the Rothschilds, the Rockefellers. And this is perfectly true. This is not conspiracy theory. I mean, anybody with half an eye can see that is true.
Right.
I think is it the Rothschilds or the Rockefellers, one of them controls 4% of the global economy. So you know that this is not imagination or conspiracy. That's the reality. And they do have the idea that they can make their own utopia, and that they can, as Karen was saying, they think they're the elite and they can give themselves the best medicines, and if things get too bad, they'll be able to go on their spaceships and escape this planet and go to Mars where it's terrifying. But you see, they're forgetting one little thing. They are relying on their science, their technology, and their machines to get them where they want to go. But it takes more than that. Yes, you need science. Yes, you need technology. Yes, you need machines. But you also need spiritual development. Without the spiritual component, it's not going to work for them. It simply won't. That's why they will lose in the end, because everything that the elite, the evil elite, right? Because it is evil. And I don't mind going out and naming families. I think one of the most evil people that I've come across recently is Hillary Clinton. Pure evil comes out of that woman, and I don't understand how everybody can't see it. The only person she's worked for in the last 30-odd years is the American taxpayer. How on earth did she become a mega millionaire? Because the only money she's ever legally got is from the taxpayer, right? So, don't tell me there's not an underlying evil among these. And she's just one of many. She's probably not even that far up the evil hierarchy. The royal family of Britain. These people, there is an underlying evil and probably reptilian influence among them.
Yeah,
but they're not
going to... Anybody that hoards mass quantities of money, more than you can ever possibly use.
Exactly.
That's part of the problem. Hoarding.
It is. It's evil. The word evil. The word evil, if you look at it, is live, spelled backwards.
Right.
They've got life wrong. They haven't understood. They think that money and material control is the all-powerful thing that they must have, and they've not understood it at all. That's the least of what you need, not the most of what you need. And without the spiritual development, they're never going to win. And the reason is that everything they do by destroying someone or something else. Everything
Right.
they have, somebody else has to suffer for so that they can get it. Somebody else has to pay for. Somebody else has to die for. So they are breaking the cardinal rule by being destructive. On the other hand, spiritual development, spiritual evolution on any level, however, low down you think you are down the totem pole, right? If you are concerned primarily with your evolution as a spiritual being, you are on the creative side. You are on the creator's side, and therefore you're going to win, because you can't destroy something until it's been created. That's why the creative always win. That's why, as they say, God wins, right? God has to win, because you can't destroy something until it's been created. So the destroyers, the evil, are the ones that are the Illuminati people that cause such misery to so many millions on this planet every single day, right? They pay the price of losing their lives when the planet goes down, when the planet has a catastrophe that you can't come back from, right? Whatever that might be, they go down with the planet. They are done and finished with everything else that is done and finished in nature, because they are totally attached to the physical reality. Without the spiritual reality, you cannot move forward. You can't evolve as a soul, and you will not survive what is coming. They will not survive. So I'm not worried about them. I honestly, at this point, I don't watch the news broadcasts. I don't involve in the politics. I don't care about it. I don't want to know about it. They can all do all the evil deeds they like, and they're all going down the tubes with it. It's no mistake, that in the good book it says, if you live by the sword, you'll die by the sword, and that's what's going to happen to them. And Emmanuel, when he was on this planet, who is, one of the Anunnaki, he told them, if you do as I say, if you live the way I tell you, if you believe that what I'm telling you is true, you can have eternal life. But if you don't believe me and you don't live right, then you will die. And he means it. It means die, dead, gone. No afterlife, no little place in heaven, no nice place to go to, because it's about energy. The whole universe is about energy. And energy changes. It transforms, it transmutes. And it can either go up and continue to evolve and express and expand. And it doesn't take much effort, You don't have to know anything about religion or metaphysics or read big books or do big meditation. You don't have to do any of that. You just have to essentially be a good person who will think about putting other people before yourself sometimes. You don't have to be perfect. Christ says, be ye perfect as your Father in heaven is perfect. Yeah, perfect would be nice. But what I'm telling you is you don't have to be perfect to become an immortal. You don't have to be perfect to live forever or have a future that's undescribably wonderful. All you have to do is just be marginally a good person. Think right. And you also have to hold in your mind, and this is most important, that you can say, I know I'm maybe not perfect, and I am trying my best to live like a decent person, but more than that, I claim my soul's right to be an immortal being. You have to stake your claim. In the old days out west, they used to come out with their wagons and stick a stake in the ground and say, I claim this land. Well, if you want, quote, heaven, if you want eternal life, if you want to move through the universe forever with the great beings of the cosmos, you have to stake your claim. You have to say, yes, I want it. And the more you want it, the more likely you are to get it. But the problem with this, and the difficulty I found for most people, is that when they start saying that to themselves and they come to believe it, they come to say, yes, I'm maybe not perfect, but I can have my immortality. I can be an eternal being. I can go to these wonderful places of the universe. They then start to examine their own behavior more closely and the way they live and what they do. And then they find that their life is going to maybe need some adjustment. Let's put it that way. They need some to correct a few things here and there, as we all do, right? And so then comes in the necessity for objective honesty with yourself at soul level. You have to tell the truth, and the truth has to be something that you can face, so that in the final analysis you can say, yes, I didn't get it all right, but here I am anyway, and I believe I can still move forward to the next step. I can still become an immortal and keep moving forward, even if I'm still at the bottom of the ladder. I can do this. You have to believe that, and to do it, it requires that you're honest with yourself. I know. I think maybe I told you this little story about myself, and it's a true story. I have some very dear friends who are traditional nuns, and I like to help them out when I can, right? So one time a few years ago, they'd had a problem at the mother house, and I had some money in the bank, and I was able to give them what they needed to fix it. And I was speaking to the Reverend Mother, and I said, yes, I can help you out here. I have enough. I can give you that to fix that problem. But you must do it. Take the money and not send me a thank you note, because every little thing I would give them, they'd be sending me these thank you notes. And an old Indian had told me years ago, never let people say thank you, because if they say thank you, then the gift you've given them is worthless. It's good for them, but it's no good to you, spiritually speaking. Right? So I said to Reverend Mother, I'll give you this, but only if you promise not to send me a thank you note. She said, no, I can't do that, Gillian. We have to thank you. We have to be grateful. I said, well, be grateful to somebody else, but don't be grateful to me. And she said, why not? I said, because I am fully aware that in order to move forward from the level I'm stuck at right now, I would have to be willing not just to give you this small gift, right, but to actually give you everything I've got, because you do such good things with the work you're doing, helping people. I'd have to give you everything I've got if I really want to move forward. And I said, I'm sorry, but I'm not willing to do that. I want my house. I want my car. I want my fur coat. I want my money in the bank. I want my cruise, right? I'm not willing to do it. And that is what I'm talking about with being honest with yourself. Come, somewhere it says, physician, know thyself, right? And this really is a great key. If we can be honest with ourselves about our faults and our failings and our, the things that we do that we know are not right. Even though we're trying to correct ourselves in a desultory sort of way, we're not making a wholehearted attempt. None of us are making a wholehearted attempt to put ourselves right, because we would all change our lives if we were. We would all give up so many things and devote our lives to the service of our neighbors, our friends, our family, with no service to self at all. But how many of us are willing to do that? I've just moved back from Idaho to Montana, and one of the main reasons I was eager to get back here to my house was because in the apartment in Coeur d'Alene, I don't have a bath, I have a shower. And I love my bathtub. And I just, every day I'm filling my bathtub. And so I'm not willing to give those things up. I'm too hedonistic to part with all my little comforts that I enjoy in life, going out to a nice restaurant or soaking in the bathtub, even though I'm very conscious that there are homeless people on the streets, and I'm really sorry about that. But am I willing to give up everything I have at this point in time? No, I'm just not that. I'm so far from perfection that I'm not willing to do that. Yeah. But that's a kind of a level and again, it's illusionary, right? I'm with this talk, I'm deluding myself that I'm being honest with myself, right? So we all create illusions for our lives. We're all living the illusion that we have created that is our life, whatever it is.
Right.
And so we justify things and we modify the illusion to suit whatever. And if we can just recognize that and just say, okay, I know I could do better. Remember when you're in school and the teacher always wrote, all right, but could do better, right?
Mm-hmm.
We could all do better. But just by recognizing it, you can claim your immortality. You can claim your place as a cosmic being and be out there in the universe having a more wonderful experience of life than you will ever get on this planet, no matter how many millions you make or how much you have at your disposal. Having once had even a touch of the energy of the cosmos in its purest form, you will never again think anything on this planet is worth dying for, right? Nothing. There's nothing in life on this planet that can compare with the purity of the unconditional love that is the foundation of the creation of the universe. And just a little quiet time, touch on that even once, and nothing else will satisfy you, no matter what you get. So believe me, or anybody who's going to listen or is listening to this, do believe me when I say it's worth standing up and saying, I claim my immortality. And just that's all you have to do. And you'll get your ticket and you'll be able to go.
Wow.
And all
great.
the bad people will not. The bad people will not.
All right. Well, we're out of time, so we've got to wrap this up. Karen, any final words?
No, just thank you. This was loads of fun and a very high-minded perspective. And thank you so much for coming and talk with us today.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I've, as usual, had a lovely time. My mother used to say, you like the sound of your own voice too much.
So I
thank you.
Well, thank you. We will have you back again. There's a lot more questions, a lot more to cover. Please, if you're out there listening, give us your feedback. Write to us at aquarianradio@gmail.com. And if you have any questions for the Anunnaki panel that you'd like us to ask each other, please do send them to aquarianradio@gmail.com. So thank you, Karen, for another good show. Got a good show. Thank you, Gillian. And thank you, Sasha, for stopping in. And much love and blessings and aloha. See you tomorrow. Same channel, same station.